This week on the podcast, we're going to talk about the new retirement, why many are choosing work over leisure. So let's get into it with Phil here this week on Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts. Welcome into Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts with CPA and personal financial specialist Phil Putney. Now let's get rolling with today's show. What's going on, folks? Thanks for tuning into the podcast with Phil and I as we talk investing, finance, retirement. And Phil, we got a new article here from a recent article. I don't want to say new, but from Fortune. It highlights the growing trend among baby boomers, people that are in their 60s and 70s that are choosing to go back to work, not out of necessity. Yep. The easy thing to do would be say, well, inflation in the last couple of years has been killing everybody.
They got to go
and
back.
They're going back to work, but this is not out of necessity. This is by choice. So with check this out. With nearly 20% of Americans over 65 still employed, so 20% of Americans over the age of 65 still got a job, the shift is kind of changing a little bit. So let's get into it. Take your thoughts on it. What you think?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely the case. I mean, in fact, I see it in my client base, right? Unfortunately, a lot of people go into retirement not really thinking the big picture through. What are you going to retire to? And we've talked about this before. When you're retiring, everyone knows where they're retiring from, right? Oh, I've had it. I'm done with this job. It's the stress, whatever. That's great. You're ready to leave, but what are you going to retire to?
Yeah.
And unless you have a purpose and the goals and something to pursue in retirement, it's going to be pretty boring, and you're not going to like retirement. So that's ultimately why I think you see a lot of this is people. They lose, first of all, that social aspect of work.
Mental stimulation is high on this list.
Yeah, being amongst cohorts and colleagues and having that purpose of I'm pursuing some kind of a goal or whatever it is in business. And if they no longer have that because they haven't figured out, well, this is what they're retiring to, some other pursuit, whether it be a hobby of some sort or working with a charity, whatever the case is, they haven't. Pursued that, so they need something to stimulate them. So
yeah, and that makes a ton of sense. And police were coming to get Phil for
I know they were coming, but
they were on the web. One point in the article, it refers to that loss of purpose, right, or even loneliness, and so that's an interesting take too, because you do have retirees who maybe they get to the retirement, they're only retired a couple of years, maybe they lose their loved one, especially earlier than thought, and really loneliness really kicks in then, right? I was at the diner a few days back and sitting there at the bar with my brother, and there was a gentleman sitting there by himself, and one of the ladies was telling me he comes in every day because his wife had just passed away, and so he comes in for some stimulation and conversation, and he was talking about going back to work, right? And it was for no other reason than, again, mental stimulation, social interaction, and some sort of purpose.
Right. Well, I've always said, I think in America, we've misinterpreted retirement, right? It's about, I'm done. I'm not going to work. And that's not retirement. To me, retirement is work becomes an option, right? So if you have to work into retirement financially, that's another scenario, right? But to me, the ability to retire doesn't mean that I'm done working. It just means I'm working on my own terms now.
Yeah.
I'm working when and if and how much I want based on whatever I want to do, whether it is for maybe some fun money, right? I don't want to worry about, I've got to stick to such and such a budget, but I want to be able to do golf or whatever your hobby is and not worry about it.
Yeah.
So I go out and get a job to pay for some of that part-time job to pay for those other activities. Or maybe it is truly just that stimulation of, hey, I really miss the structure, of a work day. So not the stress.
Just the that's the stress, right? Yeah.
When you get in there, you got to be careful because some clients get drugged back in, and now it's back to the stress again. It's like, okay, wait a minute, what did I do? I was there, and then I'm back into it again.
was that The Godfather? Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in again.
Pull you back in again, yeah.
Right? Yeah. Well, and you think about sometimes you talk to somebody younger. And they're like, oh man, if I could be, I can't wait to be retired and not have anything to do. And when we're younger, we kind of sometimes, it's real weird. We kind of have this feeling of, oh, I'd rather be doing the things I want to do and whatever the case is. But when you get older and your body starts to hurt all the time, sometimes you start to realize, hey, I just want to be active because moving actually hurts less than sitting still.
Sitting all
right?
the time. Yeah.
So it's just weird, right? All these little weird things that happen as we get older. But let's talk about that 20% of Americans still working, right? So
Mhm.
20% of Americans over the age of 65 still working. How does that affect retirement planning? How does that affect for you doing your job if you've
Sure.
got a lot of clients that are still working? I mean, you got to take that into account, right, on that tax side of things.
Right. Well, so usually when we're planning for retirement, we plan as though you don't work. Even if somebody is
Okay.
anticipating maybe working, I'm always going to plan for them not working because, what happens if they decide, well, I'm going to work part time, but then they just don't want to, right? Or they can't, or something comes up. Let's plan to see if again, work becomes optional. So let's plan as though you're not working.
Yeah.
So ultimately, yeah, if you do then go back to work, it's not going to negatively affect the plan overall, right?
Okay.
Working doesn't hurt your plan, right? Because you're not spending as much money. I mean, at the end of the day, that's a good thing long term in the plan. Does it change it? Absolutely. Because now, from a tax aspect, if
Yeah.
we were, say, targeting a certain bracket, the 22% bracket, doing Roth conversions, well, if you're working, well, then there's a piece of that bracket taken up with wages that we are not able to fill up with Roth conversions. If maybe you were spending from a non-taxable type investment, so I mean, from a tax aspect, it does require maybe some shifts,
Hmm.
but generally overall, it's not going to be a negative effect on the plan.
Yeah, I mean, you're still feathering the nest. Nothing wrong with that.
Right.
I don't know. Depending on, I mean, if you're working full time and making the same salary, then yeah,
Well, then that's a whole,
it
yeah.
could change your Social Security as well. But I think if you're doing something limited, there's probably not a big shift there either, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I was thinking more on that kind of limited part-time
Yeah,
basis. It's not going to hurt anything.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, if you're retired and then went back and got a full-time job, well, that can change the whole picture. Again, probably not going to long-term negatively affect you because you're no longer pulling maybe from retirement accounts because you're earning
yeah.
a full-time wage now. But there's other aspects of the plan, Social Security being one of them, that you've got to be conscious of. Depending on what age it is that you filed for Social Security, you may end up now losing the benefit or having to repay some of that benefit, effectively kind of shutting it down because you're earning too much income if that's prior to your full retirement. So,
Gotcha.
I mean,
Yeah.
if it's after full retirement, in fact, I just had this discussion with a client today that unfortunately got let go. He just turned or is turning full retirement next month. So we had that discussion on Social Security. His plan was to work till 70 and not claim Social Security until then.
Right.
But I said, yeah, you can go ahead and file for it today. Doesn't hurt because even if you do get a full-time job again, well, we can always shut the benefit off because you can suspend it. And if you wanted to keep it, just mathematically, it makes sense because you're not getting enough through this job.
Yeah.
Then you're not gonna end up losing any of that benefit because you're not limited on how much you can earn. So
Gotcha.
that
Yeah.
that piece of it is going to probably be the biggest effect of working. Is understanding if you file for Social Security, that relationship and how it affects it. So,
Yeah, that makes sense. The article touches a little bit on different generations. Obviously, a lot of it's around the baby boomers
right.
being identified, as tied to work a little bit more than younger generations. Now,
Yep.
I'm Gen X, so over
Yep.
50, right? So are you starting to see more Gen Xers, coming in for advice? I think over 50 people we start to think a bit more about retirement planning, right? I know a lot of the clients that financial advisors tend to have, financial professionals tend to have, or over the age of 60, right? But I think we're seeing more and more people over the age of 50 and even a little bit younger starting to ask for help. Do you see any kind of differences there as far as the attitudes and feelings towards work?
Yeah, I mean, I think the younger generation, work isn't, or commitment, should say, maybe to a company or career isn't what it was in the older generations, right? I mean, I've got a lot of clients that they've only worked for one company ever in their
Yeah.
entire retirement, right? 30 years of working for a single company. I mean, take that to the youngest generation today. That's not even feasible, or it's not even a concept they understand because it's like
Right.
2 or 3 years at a company. They're moving on to the next best thing.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's totally
And,
different
and
shift from that standpoint. But
it's interesting. I kind of am envious of that a little bit because I think at one point, and
that
not that I'm
stability,
that,
yeah,
not that I've had a real longevity at a lot of places my own self, like the 30-year thing, but I do think that if you're smart and you're marketing yourself and you're improving yourself, there's, hey, yeah, you should continue to try to, find the best thing out there for you.
Right.
That said, I do also see the value though of being like, this is comfortable. Like I've been here, I'm treated well. This is good for me. Right.
Right.
So it's a fine, interesting line depending on, I guess, maybe your personality type.
It absolutely is. And for some people, yeah, I would think even today, if they find the right company, the right position, the growth opportunities there, that career path is there, they can probably still do that. But other people just like that thrill, I don't want to say thrill, but that's just kind of how
new challenges.
Right? It's the new challenge, right?
Yeah.
Maybe the current position doesn't give them that opportunity, that challenge, that career path going forward. And I think, and I'm not trying to blame this on the younger worker. I mean, it is to some extent, I think, a mind shift, but companies have changed dramatically too, right? I mean, companies no longer, I think, provide that environment. I mean, it used to be that you came into some of these companies. I mean, there was a clear career path that, hey, if you wanted to go from, working on the line all the way up and be a manager, an executive that position here's the path and how to get there. And
they maybe don't invest as much back in the employees they used to.
Yep. You can see how to do that because other people have done it, but now a lot of those companies are looking at that older generation and saying, well, that's where a lot of cost is, not looking at the wisdom and kind of brushing them to the side, trying to bring the next generation in, which, I mean, to some extent, you have to have that new knowledge in there, but there's a lot of wisdom there too. So I think the work environment has kind of pushed some of the employees towards that. So
yeah, and technology obviously has changed that. We talked a few weeks back about being able to do the snowbird thing, and if you were older, but even just the younger generations embracing being able to work remotely and like, hey, we're gonna we might live in Indiana, but we're gonna work half the year in Louisiana because we want to be down for Mardi Gras and stuff. And if your job allows you to do that because of remote work, I'm totally envious of that. That's awesome, right? That would have been a great way to spend my 20s and 30s, but the technology did not exist at that time. So
well, my brother-in-law, sister-in-law, that is their case. They back prior to COVID, I think it was actually, they ended up moving into an RV full time and they travel around the country. So
there you go.
Doing just cool. That because I mean he is able to do a lot of what he does remotely, most of what he does, and I mean he does travel some to clients' locations, as a consultant. But
The Tax Smart Retiree is your comprehensive guide to mastering tax efficiency for a flourishing retirement. You will find indispensable advice and actionable strategies designed to enhance tax savings, maximize Social Security benefits, protect against market volatility, and develop a customized retirement plan. To get your free ebook, click the link in the show notes of today's episode and download your copy of The Tax Smart Retiree right now.
Well, so the article, and we'll put a link to the article in the show notes below, folks, for you guys to check it out if you want to. I think at the end of the day, my takeaway from it, Phil, was choosing work over leisure. It's a personal specific thing. Like, I think just like anything that we've created, especially here, in our culture, is having options is great, right? So if it makes you happy and it works within a strategy you put together, go for it, right? And if it makes you happy to be retired and not work, well, do that too, right?
Yeah.
Just have a plan and a strategy so you can support yourself.
And I've got clients on both sides of that equation. I have some clients that they're, from their viewpoint, enjoying retirement, right? They're so busy traveling and, seeing the grandkids and everything else. That's their version of retirement. That's the leisure side. They're not sitting at home, watching TV all day. They're very active in their retirement. And that fulfills what they wanted in retirement, at least this early stage of retirement. I've got other clients on the other side that's just not what they like, right? That's not how they enjoy retirement and spending time. They find a lot of purpose in having some kind of a position and a job, and they haven't maybe retired fully, right? Or, they're still working, even if it's doing a volunteer work, they're still active in some kind of a structured environment, because that fulfills them. There's no right or wrong answer, right? No. It's just understanding what you're retiring to. What does that retirement look like? It doesn't mean not work. If that's your vision of retirement, then don't work. Make sure you plan for that. So,
I think we want to feel useful, right?
Yes.
In whatever that capacity is, we want to feel useful. And so if we're doing something to help somebody that's useful, whether it's ourselves or our loved one or a job or whatever, I think that we get a lot of, that brings a lot of personal fulfillment to our day. So end of the day, no right or wrong answer, but interesting article. Like, again, we'll share that with you in the show notes if you want to check that out. And if you got questions about your own situation, right? You want to be retired and not work, make sure that you got the finances for it. Or you want to be retired and sort of work, make sure you got the finances for it. Sit down with a qualified professional like Phil. As always, if you got questions, need some help, you can find the links to below in the show descriptions to reach out to him. But you can find him at philstaxhacks.com. That's philstaxhacks.com, which is the podcast website, but you can get redirected to his main website and get some time onto the calendar. Phil, thanks for hanging out as always, my friend, and breaking it down. And we're into February in a hot second, so the year is on the move.
It's on the move.
Yeah, so don't forget to subscribe to us. We'll see you next time here on Phil's Tax Hacks and other retirement facts, Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. We'll catch you later.
Phil? Investment advisory services offered through AFS Wealth Management. The content of this program is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. Investments and or investment strategies involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment strategy will achieve its objectives.